All right. Welcome, 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 Kirsten. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm really excited about this topic. We hear so much about just like the doom and gloom about higher ed. And it's always good to hear the good news. And I'm really glad that you get to share that good news. So everyone, welcome. Thank you for being here. I know a few more people will come in as we get started. So I usually just like to start with an intro of what to expect, and then we'll go into the highlight of the day, which is our guest speaker. So today we're going to be talking about attracting non-traditional students, and we're going to be talking about successful approaches to connecting with and enrolling non-traditional students in online and on-the-ground programs. I'm really eager to hear more about this because I don't think a lot of people talk about non-traditional students, and a lot of people don't talk about how different it is reaching people in non-traditional that are online versus people that are on the ground. So I think it's going to really be an awesome session. First of all, I just want to do a quick Zoom housekeeping note. We have live transcription on. So if you are interested or you would like to experience it, if you haven't experienced it yet, please go into your captions and you should see chat, raise hand, Q&A, and then show captions. You can just go in there and enable it in whichever language. And Zoom captions are pretty good. We've heard that from a few people. So if you have any questions, please use the chat button, ask your questions. You can also raise your hand, and depending on how much time we have available, we can even bring you in to speak. And then you can also use the Q&A function. Also, I always like to highlight that this is a series. We've had quite a few amazing speakers already. We talked about the creator economy. We talked about modeling inclusion. You should have gotten links to the replays already. If not, let me know, and I'll make sure that you get it. Today, we have Kirsten with us about non-traditional students. October 20th, we're going to have part 2 of Marketing to Gen Z. And then we're going to be talking about inclusive, equitable content November 1st. And then November 17th, we're ending talking about the metaverse. I know we're all curious to see how the metaverse applies to us in higher ed. And a little bit about Olark. Olark is a live chat platform. We make the simplest and most accessible way to connect with students where and when they need you the most. Some of our higher ed clients, you can see some of those logos there. They love the flexibility of our chatbots and automation tools and our commitment to accessibility. And we also have a first of its kind Slate integration. So whatever communication you have with your students, it can go into Slate as well, so that you keep having that, you keep continuing with that conversation. So really excited about that. And then a little bit about me. I'm Osai. I'm the head of demand generation. And I'm really, really just like eager to learn more about higher ed. I also am an adjunct professor in one of the universities here. So it's just, it's always fun when you can connect stuff that you're just excited about with the work that you do every day. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Kirsten Fedderke. I was practicing, and I hope I got it right.
You did.
Thank you. So with a 20-year communications career working with nonprofit organizations, Kirsten knows how to identify a client's unique strengths and turn those strengths into real results. She has helped countless clients strengthen their brands, enrollment numbers, and market positions. Kirsten holds a BA in art history and French from Smith College and an MBA with a finance emphasis from Loyola University, Chicago. She previously served as a consultant for the National Association of Secondary School Principals and the American Association of Museums. And in her free time, she enjoys the antics of her twin sons. Wow. Kirsten, you are super busy. And of course, as you can see, she is the Senior Vice President, Enrollment Marketing at Lipman Hearn. So I'm really glad that you're here, and I look forward to your insights. I'm going to stop sharing now so that you can share your slides and give us all the data about just working with non-traditional students and application for us so that we know how to connect with them and enroll them. In the meantime, I've noticed that Camille's here, David's here. Please leave any questions you have in chat. Let us know if you have any concerns, thoughts, anything that you're really eager to know about, and so that we can respond as soon as we can and in the most timely way and just like engaging as much as we can. So I'll stop sharing. Go ahead, Kirsten.
Great, thank you. There we go. Great. Well, thank you for having me and for that welcome. I'm also very excited to be here and to talk about non-traditional students and how we can better connect with them and enroll them in our classrooms. So my agenda for our time together is very quickly a minute about Lipman Hearn, just to give you some background on why this audience is of particular interest to us and what we've been doing to better understand what's happening with non-traditional or adult students. But then I'd really like to dive into what we're seeing in the non-traditional student market, some of the trends and some of the things we've observed that can help us better connect with them. And then finally, talk about some specifics on how we can put this information and data to use in marketing with adult prospective students. So my 1 minute about Lipman Hearn. We are a marketing and communications agency, and we work exclusively with nonprofit clients and primarily in higher education. And I think what is really special about our approach and what I really appreciate is that we really bring a brand lens to what we're working on and think about how brand development and having a unique and differentiated position in the market can then support enrollment marketing, philanthropic marketing, and other initiatives that are important to nonprofits and higher education. We have had the honor and the privilege of working with over 500 colleges and universities in our agency's history. And like Osai said, we have some clients that really showcase the breadth of colleges and universities that we work with, both in terms of size, public and private institutions, and all across the country. And so we really have had the great privilege of seeing up close and personal what all of these different kinds of institutions are doing to connect with different kinds of students and really shape the classes that are the right fit for their institution. But in addition to watching what our clients are doing and participating with them in understanding their audiences, we also do proprietary research to help add knowledge to the field about the audiences that are important to us. These are a few examples of some recent studies that we conducted to better understand prospective students and their influencers, as well as prospective donors. And the adult student market is another one that we've done quite a bit of research on. So with that, I will move into talking a little bit about what we're seeing in the market. And like I said, we did conduct some primary research with prospective adult students. But I also have been keeping a close eye on data and information in the news media and in the higher education media as well, to really try to build a bigger picture of what are the trends that we're seeing in the non-traditional or adult student market, and how can we build insights out of those trends that can help inform marketing. So to level set for a second, when we're thinking about adult or non-traditional students and the size of the market, the best understanding that we have is that this market really could be and likely is as many as 95 million people in the US. And these are people who have a high school diploma but no college credit, people who have some credit but no degree, that they started a college career but for one reason or another did not complete, and those students who have earned an associate's degree but have not continued on to the bachelor's degree. So those three populations together represent just a huge opportunity of people who could really benefit from a bachelor's degree or a higher education degree, and who may be in the market for that degree. But they are not on that sort of well-worn path from high school into college anymore. So it's highly likely that no one is marketing to them. And so when a member of one of these groups starts thinking that college might be right for them and now might be the time, it's likely that they are on their own thinking about how to learn about the opportunities and the options that they have. We're also seeing some shifts in this population. And sort of what comprises this large population of prospective adult students. Not surprisingly, the last couple of years have been really disruptive in higher education, as I'm sure you're all seeing as well. And we're seeing a spike in that some college no degree population. So the group of people who started college and stopped out really jumped up over the last few years, likely due to the pandemic, but many other forces as well. But what we also have seen is that adults who are 25 or older already represent a large portion of the higher education population. 37% of college students are 25 or older. So adult students are already engaged and enrolled, but this tends to be concentrated at some institutions who serve adult students really heavily, and the adult students make up the vast majority of their population. Like I said, we know the pandemic has had an effect here, and we're seeing disruption across the board. That, again, that some college no degree population has jumped up. Estimates are that about 500,000 people dropped out or stopped out of college over the last 3 years, two to 3 years. But we're also seeing that 1 million fewer high school students went directly into college than would have been anticipated. And it's likely that both of these groups, they're stopping out or choosing a path other than college due to financial pressures, workplace demands, caring for family, but also stress and their mental health. That's really rising as a topic of discussion among the college-going population. We also hear a lot about students not feeling successful in the shift to online. So as their institution needed to shift to online in 2020, that if that was not a positive experience for them, it's increasingly likely that they decided to stop out. And then in terms of those who didn't even start college, who went straight into the workforce or another path out of high school, we know that even before the pandemic, about 40% of low-income students who were admitted to college never enrolled. So that trend just continues. And then of those people, those adults who changed or canceled their education plans specifically as a result of COVID-19, a smaller share are planning to return to higher ed. So as you can see here, this research suggests that 15% of adults who did decide to disrupt their education just flat out canceled their plans, that they decided that now wasn't the right time and they're not sure when is, that they didn't delay, but they canceled their plans. So we also know that even before the pandemic, predictions suggested a decline in adult student enrollment. So engaging this audience is not a given. There's a lot of barriers in their way, and there's a lot that we can do to encourage them on that pathway to enrollment. Some of the other things that we've noticed and have really come to the forefront, and this was uncovered in the research we did a couple years ago with adult students, and has also been reinforced in more recent research, that there's just a tremendous amount of uncertainty in the adult student search process. That of prospective adult students that we surveyed, they were interested in a variety of learning modalities. They were interested in being on campus and online and hybrid, and they were very likely to be considering a wide variety of degree and discipline options. So the sense that that adult students are most likely to be online and most likely to have a very clear picture in mind of what they want to study, it's not necessarily accurate, that these prospective students are really still searching for what format, what approach, and even what discipline will help them serve their needs. So really helping to counsel them on this path and learn what options are even available to them represents a huge opportunity that we'll talk about more in just a minute. And then in terms of the biggest roadblocks that we see that get in the way of prospective adult students enrolling, there are some unsurprising things that rise to the surface. The financial barriers, both real and perceived, of the ability to pay for college can be a huge hurdle getting in the way of adults from enrolling. And then responsibilities outside the classroom, whether that's in the workplace or with their families, clearly represent a huge demand on their time and their ability to take on another challenge. But I think what's really interesting is, in addition to those sort of concrete challenges, we're observing a lot of more emotional roadblocks, that adults are very likely to feel overwhelmed by their options. Like I mentioned, they may not know exactly what path they want to be on. And higher ed can be a little opaque. We can use jargon. We can have certain expectations that people know what different terminology means and how different pieces fit together in the enrollment process. And adults may not know that, and they don't necessarily have the counseling that high school students have to overcome some of that overwhelm and anxiety. They also are likely to say that they don't feel supported by institutions, that they can't quite picture themselves as an important member of a community that they're looking at. And they are more likely than traditional age prospects to really question the value of higher education overall. They likely have some job experience, and they know what they've learned on the job has some real value. So they suspect that colleges and universities may not value or appreciate their experience. And they may suspect that they're able to get equivalent experience in a format other than higher education. And to that point, finally, non-traditional learners like I said, aren't necessarily thinking that traditional higher education is the only source of the credentials that they may need. We're seeing a growing demand for alternative credentials, reskilling programs or career-oriented certifications, micro-credentials and short-form learning. There's really a wide and growing variety of options in the landscape for adults to get the credential or the further learning that they need to move up in their career. And there's a tremendous amount of growth among providers who offer these alternative pathways. So the takeaway from all of that we're seeing in the market is that growth in adult learners as a portion of a population in higher education isn't a given. They have a lot in their way. They have a lot of options. And traditionally, higher education hasn't created a smooth pathway for adults who took a more circuitous route to get back into the classroom. So to reconnect with this audience, there's a lot that can be done, both in terms of what I'll call here product, and I know we don't always like to use that word in higher education, but product innovation, what are we offering to adults? And importantly, marketing and recruitment support. So luckily, we think there's a lot of opportunity. So what can we do? In terms of the product innovation, there's a lot that can be done. But I also want to really recognize that a lot of what can be done on the product or strategic innovation front doesn't necessarily fall squarely in marketing. These aren't things that marketing can necessarily solve, but marketers can certainly have a seat at the table to bring the perspective of the audience, to bring our understanding of adult learners and what's in their way, and what are those emotional and concrete and perceived barriers in their way, and how can our institutions help them overcome those challenges. So some of the things that we have seen our clients working on and have had the opportunity to participate in from that marketing seat is to really, at a strategic level, think about unbundling some of the aspects of a degree program that had previously been considered hard and fast and inflexible, that really rethinking tuition rates and modality and location of degrees is a real opportunity. I have one client who participates in what they're calling on their campus an unbundling task force that is looking at exactly these issues and trying to understand how to best meet the needs of adult students and make it really clear for them to understand what their options are. And then credit for prior learning. This is something that many institutions are doing and are really innovating and thinking about how to recognize and appreciate the experience that adults bring into the classroom. But it's really important to adults to know that they're going to have that credit, both in terms of actual credit, but also in terms of respect and appreciation within the classroom. So from a marketing perspective, making sure that when there are prior learning credits available, that it's really clear how to access them and what the requirements will be to unlock those credits towards your degree. And then, like I said, the shift to online learning was not smooth for many people. So I know a lot of institutions are also really investing here and really committing to making the e-learning experience really engaging and meaningful in new ways. And from a marketing perspective, showcasing what your institution is doing in this front is a huge opportunity. Many people, especially adults who have been out of the education space for quite some time, may have absolutely no concept of what a digital classroom looks like, feels like, how it operates. So giving some samples of what it would feel like and how it would actually unfold to be in a digital classroom can give some real insight that adults don't necessarily have access to right now. And then finally, like I said, that pathway to enrollment or re-enrollment for an adult can be bumpy. And we can put a lot of roadblocks in their way that really can trip up the process. So making sure that there is, that they have a contact, they have someone to talk to, and that there's a process for getting them re-engaged. And then I think the other thing to think about is that partnerships in this space are a huge opportunity, that whether that's corporate partnerships that allow employers to offer educational credits and opportunity to their employees through a partnership with a higher ed institution, or whether this is a partnership with a provider in the higher ed space who really understands adult learners and can help connect with them and can help get them into your recruitment funnel. There are many opportunities. So thinking about building something to recruit adult students from the ground up can be pretty daunting and can be a huge investment, but there are ways to really start incrementally and to engage outside resources to help make it more feasible. And now I want to shift into specifically what we as marketers can do to better connect with this audience and to really move them down the enrollment funnel. So I hope you'll come away with this with some ideas of things that you can do at your institutions. The first is really to dig into our understanding of the audience, of their mindset, of what their preconceived notions or perceptions might be, and where we might need to do some work to update those perceptions of higher education. So some of what we know about this some credit, no degree audience can be really helpful when thinking about crafting messaging and thinking about what they need to know to feel like they can overcome some of those hurdles to get re-enrolled. We know that the majority left higher education at least a decade ago. So they have their experience with college is pretty far in the rear view mirror. And like I said, they may have no concept of what an e-learning or online learning environment might be like. They may not know what some of the new programs and degrees that have come online over the last few years are that have really strong, solid career paths attached to them. So we really have to assume that there's a lot of catching up to do with this audience about what we as institutions have done in the last decade. They also were very likely to have had a pretty short college career. Most of that some credit, no degree audience left higher education within the first 2 years. So again, they may not have sort of that depth of experience of what the later years really contain, and digging deeply into the topics of interest and building relationships with faculty and peers and building their network. They're most likely to have attended only one institution, so they don't have a really broad perspective to draw from of how different schools might do things differently. They're also more likely to be people of color or from low-income families. And like I said earlier, they're not necessarily committed to one modality or degree type. They might be really exploring what their options are and what can get them to where they want to go. And then I think really importantly, we know that they have a very long consideration phase. Some of them may not have been thinking about higher ed over the past decade. Some of them may have been thinking periodically, I should really go back and I should really get this finished. And that can take years to think through and to gather information about the schools that might serve them well. But what we also know is once they make a decision to enroll, most adults end up enrolled within 30 days. So they are spending a long time thinking about this, but once they make the decision, and that likely is connected with making a connection with someone who's helping them on that path, whether that's an admissions counselor or an advisor, they make the decision quickly and they want to get into the classroom quickly. There are a lot of ways to find this audience. Once we know a little bit about them and we have a sense of what some of their thinking might be about the college enrollment process, we need to find them. And we can certainly do a lot of digital advertising and other kinds of lead generation to build a prospect pool. But one of the things I wanted to talk about is using what you've got in identifying adult prospective students. So I think we all have a lot more data at our fingertips than we're necessarily aware of, especially when it comes to adult prospective students. That most institutions' databases go back many, many, many years. And if the data has been well kept, you likely have quite large populations of students, the data on students who stopped out, as well as those who were admitted but never enrolled. And I will pause here and say that I have often heard from clients the sentiment or the expectation that their students who were admitted but didn't enroll went somewhere else and maybe went somewhere better. But what we have found by doing data analysis on these populations of students who were admitted but didn't enroll in our client institutions, there is a large population of them that never enrolled anywhere. They decided to opt out of the process. And that is even before the pandemic. There's a very large population who at some point had an interest in going to college, a strong enough interest to apply and be admitted, but they chose a different path for whatever reason. And then we also have inquiries or incomplete apps that maybe have a little less sort of commitment to higher ed and commitment to your institution, but we're interested in higher education at some point. So if you gather all of that data into a giant, what we would call a supercharged house list, it's likely to be a pretty large pool of data. And you may or may not already be using the National Student Clearinghouse service, but this is a really powerful tool that all institutions can get access to that can help make sense of this data, that can help identify students who did go somewhere else and completed a degree, but importantly, identify those students who never did complete a degree. So you can clean up your data and make sure you're not marketing to someone who did go on somewhere else and is done and not in the market anymore, but really build a list of prospective students that it's entirely possible no one else is marketing to. And at some point, they had an interest in your institution. and they had an interest in higher ed. So we have a pretty well vetted list here that can help to help build that prospect pool through direct marketing initiatives. So this can be a little bit complicated, but it also can be really, really powerful and give you an opportunity to build a marketing program using mostly email and other direct channels to an audience that may well be poised to take action. So when talking to this audience, we can also really tailor the message, again, based on what we know about them from some of the previous data I shared, as well as really thinking through the offer that your institution has for adult students. So covering the basic info. How are they going to pay for it? How much is this going to cost? How are you going to help them pay for it? When are classes offered? The sort of tactical and transactional information that they're going to need to know whether you have an offering that will work for them. But that's not the only information they're looking for. And so not getting stuck at sort of that transactional level is really important. We know, and we know from some data from the survey that we conducted, that adult learners are really interested in knowing what it's going to feel like to pursue this opportunity, and not just what it's going to feel like to walk across the stage at graduation, and not just what it's going to feel like to be up in the middle of the night at the kitchen table when their kids are asleep doing an online course, but all throughout the process. What's it going to feel like to request information and maybe come visit a campus if they haven't been on a college campus in 10 years? And who's going to help them complete their application or complete their financial aid application and weigh their packaging? And then what is it going to feel like to be in the classroom? And who will they be with? So making sure that your communications really touch on the entire process, from requesting information all the way through to graduation and beyond. And that you are depicting adult learners in those scenarios, that they're not feeling like they're going to be surrounded only by 18 and 19-year-olds, but that if your community is diverse in age and has adult learners showing them in your marketing materials. And knowing that there may be a fair amount of skepticism about the value of a college degree, which we certainly know is a problem right now. Having a strong institutional value proposition. And this is where Lipman Hearn in particular, our perspective on the importance of having a strong brand when thinking about enrollment marketing is really aligned here, that making sure that you can clearly articulate the value proposition to your institution and your degrees can help combat some of that skepticism. And then finally, illustrating outcomes, which of course includes financial and career success. What kinds of jobs do your graduates go on to get? And what kinds of paths do they land on after completing your programs? But also the emotional benefits that we know that adult students are looking for. They want to feel that they're coming out of a college program feeling more confident and feeling more ready for what's ahead of them. So showing that sort of emotional piece as well can be really, really powerful. And then finally, be there when they're ready. So like I mentioned, this audience can have an incredibly long consideration phase. And so having a long communications flow, whether it's your own house list that you're marketing to, or whether you're generating new leads through advertising, or whether you're working with a corporate partner and marketing to their employees, having a long communications flow is really, really essential. We are managing the communications for adult prospects for a client, and we have prospects who have been in our comms flow for 2 years and open emails periodically, and then don't open emails for a very long time, and then suddenly fill out a request for information form and get enrolled. So being in their inbox, being in their social media feeds, being there when they're ready is really important, and having a variety of messaging that answers all those questions we went through earlier, that answers how will I pay for this? And what will this feel like to enroll? And what are the outcomes? Having a cadence that touches on all of those different topics frequently, so that when they start opening your emails, you're there with answers to every question they possibly could have, is a really important opportunity. And using really clear calls to action, making sure they know what the next steps are, making sure they know who to call or who to contact to move forward, which is related to smoothing the pathway for re-enrollment, making sure that they can get over those hurdles, get over those road bumps, and get back into the classroom and get towards their degree, is really the institutions who can do that and who respond quickly when they are ready are the institutions that are enrolling these students and getting them the degrees that they need. So with that, I will pause here and see if we have any questions. And I don't actually know how to view that.
Oh, no worries. I am looking at the Q&As and in the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to put it in Q&A or to put it in chat, and then Kirsten can respond. In the meantime, one question that came in was, how do you get buy-in from the rest of your team if you haven't started this kind of process?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think the numbers can help. Data is always well received in higher ed settings. And so really showing the size of the market and the opportunity that exists. And I think there's storytelling opportunities, finding some adult students who are in your population right now, or some alums who went through your program as a non-traditional or adult student, and finding out what happened to them and how completing your program is changing or did change their life, so that you can sort of balance that big picture of the cold hard facts that make the case for committing to and investing in this audience, and then also showing what it really looks like and feels like on a personal level. I think if you can balance those two pieces, it can really make a powerful case for investing in this audience. And then it can be an investment. So I think also really thinking creatively about what is feasible for your institution based on the resources that you have or what you feel could be available, and determining whether this is something that you can take on fully in-house and build up some capability and some expertise about this audience and handle communications and marketing, as well as the enrollment piece, enrollment management, or whether this is a place to look for an outside partner who can help support in one way or another. There's many options out there, but really digging into what's feasible for your organization, because there will be a solution, but it may take a little creative thinking.
Okay. Another question that came in from Rachel. How much does this audience care about the peers who they will be learning alongside? Are there insecurities there? And if so, how do you assuage their concerns?
That's a really good question, Rachel. And I think the answer is yes. They do care about the peers they will be learning alongside. We've definitely seen that in the data that we've collected, that the respondents to a survey that we did, I was shocked at how many of them stated that having a diverse and welcoming and an inclusive community was important to them, was ranked very highly. I don't have the data point right in front of me, but it was trailing just behind some of those sort of the big three of, can I pay for this, and do you have the program I want? The next in line really was, is this community going to be a place that I can see myself and a place that I can learn from and build a network? So yes, and I do also think, yes, there are insecurities there. There's a lot of anxiety among this audience. And so I think that, again, there's a real storytelling opportunity here of showing them in sort of bite-sized pieces what this will be like and how we'll make it work for them. So again, seeing the happy graduates walking across the stage doesn't do the heavy lifting of showing them all along the way who will be supporting them, who will be working with them, who will be teaching them, who will they be working on group projects with, and really telling those stories so that they can picture it and wrap their minds around what that will feel like.
Okay, and you mentioned earlier that this can take an investment and it's a long-term strategy, essentially. If people were to say, okay, we want to take one thing, just one thing and go get started today, what would that one thing be? What one strategy or the first step you would recommend?
That's a really good question. I would say starting to think about the stories that you're telling, whether that's on your website or in materials that you're sending out or in your advertising. If you have a population of adult learners in your community now, are you showing them? And are you reflecting the experience that they're having in their materials? I think the most sort of passive way to start to appeal to this audience is to have them see themselves if they visit your website, or if they're served an ad in social media, or are somehow connected to you, that if they visit your website or look at an ad and see only 18-year-olds, that is not going to really start to do that storytelling of showing how someone like them could fit in. So I think that's a first step, is sort of taking a look at what you're putting out into the market and assessing it or auditing it for representation of adult students, and telling of their stories, I think is a really good first step.
Awesome. And I mean, this was just, 40 minutes of conversation. If people wanted to connect with you to learn more or to answer like very specific questions for their institutions, what would be the best way to connect with you?
I would love to have emails or phone calls. I would love to connect with any participants. And actually, I don't have that on a slide here. I'd be happy to drop my email address in the chat, or if there's follow-up, I'm happy to have that included. But yes, I would love to connect with anyone who wants to talk more about working with this audience.
Okay. So one final question. We're going into Q4. Oh, great. You've put it in chat. So I'll also share it in the follow-up emails, but we're going into Q4 very soon. We'll be starting the cycle again for recruitment. What are some things that we started looking at stories, or started looking at maybe the kinds of pictures that we have? What are some things that we can be paying attention to for Q4 or Q1 of next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really interesting with this audience is they are not on an academic calendar anymore. So this kind of gets to making sure that we're putting their mindset front and center rather than ours, that their decision process can be happening at any time of year. So any time is a great time to start communicating with this audience. So thinking about how you want to target them, thinking about some goals. I think especially as we're talking about the academic calendar planning cycle, really trying to identify what is realistic for recruiting adult learners, where you have capacity, and set some goals so that as you go into the next budget cycle, you can start figuring out what you might need to put into your budget to meet those goals.
Awesome. Well, it has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much. If you have any other questions, Camille, Olivia, Monica, Rachel, Tamara, David, if you have any other questions, feel free to leave them here or email us, and then I'll be sure to forward them to Kirsten. But in the meantime, Kirsten, I really appreciate your time. This has been super insightful, and perhaps we'll have to call you back for part 2.
I would love that. That's been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.